you noticed what has been taking place in our world already just this year? We are surrounded by natural and man-made disasters. All the same time, the population of our world is climbing towards 8 billion people, and yet our world is run almost entirely on non-renewable resources. As our world becomes increasingly globalised into one vast empire, many are asking, what is about to happen? Where is our world headed? Did you know that the major events taking place right now and many more besides were predicted thousands of years ago in the prophetic code of Scripture? Did you also know that many of the events being fulfilled right now could not have been even dreamed of as possible before the arrival of our generation? Find out what is just around the corner. How will this great empire melt down? The empire melts down.
My first question that I have tonight as we start our seminar is, how many of you have ever counted down to something before? Has anyone ever counted down before? Maybe it was a famous, or not famous, but your birthday, a popular day in obviously the calendar for yourself. Or maybe it was an exam. How many of you have ever counted down to an exam before? The students would have counted down to an exam. Maybe it was an anniversary, maybe it was another important date. Just last Sunday, I had the opportunity to be involved in an examination. Thankfully, I wasn't the candidate. You see, for our medical studies, when you specialize in a particular area, you often have an exam which you sit, or the candidate will sit, to qualify them to be a specific type of doctor. And so one of the exams I was helping with was an exam for pediatricians, which are doctors who are studying to look after kids. And so they were sitting this exam. Each candidate has an assistant. And so I was assigned to one candidate. And my job for the entire day, from 7:30 in the morning to 6 o'clock at night, was to help them with their timing. So I would guide them from room to room and tell them how much time they have. You have a 5-minute break here. You have a 15-minute exam at the next station. Then you wait for 20 minutes. Then you have a 1 hour in this room. And then 2 hours break for lunch, and then 1 hour for this, and 10 minutes for that, and 5 minutes to go to the toilet, and 3 minutes to drink water. And so that was my responsibility, to count down to make sure that my exam candidate was not late. And so the candidate was relying on me to count down to make sure that they got to the right place at the right time. Now, if I was a very mean person, I would have given them less time, or maybe confuse them a little with their timing. But most of us try to help our candidates out by giving them as much time as possible, by getting water for them, by bringing them to the right room before time. And so when you count down to something, often it's in anticipation. It may be positive anticipation that you want the special event to come, a birthday party of some sort, or it may be a not so positive anticipation. You wish that your exams were just another extra day away so you had more time to revise. Whatever it is that you count down towards, there's a sense of expectation that you have when you come to this particular event. And so tonight, we look at the countdown to the last empire. Jeremy already succinctly summarized our talk last night. In fact, I was thinking about swapping places as he was describing last night. He can do the talk and I can be the MC. How's that? What happens before the last empire? You remember our statue? We have gold, silver, brass, we have legs of iron as we described last night, and then feet of iron and clay, and then a big stone comes. But before that last empire comes, we have to discover what exactly will happen and will take place. Well, look no further. We go back to the same source where we started last night to find some clues into this particular question. You see, this question is not new. In fact, in Matthew 24, verse 3, a section of the Bible, the disciples asked Jesus to tell about what would happen before the end of time. And we studied last night, the end of the world is coming at the end of the statue. And so the question, when will these things be? What signs of the end of the age are there? And so tonight we look at the signs as we go along. Yes, I notice some of you are taking some notes. So I want to highlight to you tonight that there will be 5 groups of signs. So if you're taking notes, you can put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on your piece of paper, your iPad or your phone, and we will go through 5 groups of signs that show the end of the age or the end of the world is coming. We start off tonight in an interesting place. A journey in a world that gives us clues to the last empire. What I mean by this is, number one, the signs of the natural world. You may not realize it, but every day that you read your newspaper or that you look on your TV or that you go online and browse, you will start to find that there are signs in the natural world around us that suggest the last empire is coming. Let me give you some examples. The Bible says in Matthew 24 verse 7, there will be famines, and you notice that there are over 500 plus million people desperate for a meal today. As I go along in the seminar series, I tell you a little bit more about what I do. I also wear another hat. I'm a master's student. I study the subject of public health alongside my medical career. And so when we study public health, we look at solutions to how to fix the world's biggest problems, health problems. And one of these health problems is the fact that a lot of people, in fact, a lot of people, as you can see the number on the screen here, do not have enough nutrition. Whereas only a small percentage of the world has enough or too much nutrition. In fact, they say that 925 million people go to bed hungry every night. In Australia, you know that sometimes once a year they will have a specific charity event where CEOs of companies and businesses are asked to trade for one night their bed for a sleep on the street to experience what it's like to be a homeless person without dinner or a blanket. This usually happens in winter, and they get to sleep at the MCG, which is the cricket ground in the city, to experience what it's like without a sleeping bag, without a blanket, with only perhaps a beanie and some clothes that they have on their back to keep them warm without food. You notice that in the world, there is only estimated to be a 1.1% increase in the harvest every year as scientists and farmers work together to establish their crop and to maximize their crop. But there is an increase in 10% of the population each year worldwide over a decade. Now, it doesn't take a brilliant mathematician to figure out that a 1% increase in harvest does not feed a 10% increase in population. And so I'm going to put to you tonight that at some stage in the world's history, or rather in the world's time to come, there will be a period of time where more and more and more people run out of food to eat. In some of the health talks that you will hear throughout this seminar series, we illustrate ways with which you can help this problem by doing certain things in your everyday life. But back to our question tonight, what signs will there be before this last empire happens or comes to pass? The first sign is that there will be famines throughout the world. The second sign may be something that is slightly closer to your heart. How many of you have ever experienced an earthquake before? How many of you have ever experienced a real earthquake before? Okay, some people have put up their hands. The best earthquake that I ever experienced, or the worst earthquake I ever experienced, was sitting at home one day. Now, it's not a very bad earthquake. In fact, it was only a Richter scale 3.3 earthquake. There was an earthquake about, I think, a year and a half ago that went through Melbourne. That's not really an earthquake. It was like a train going by. I thought it was the train, but then the plate started to shake. Then I realized it couldn't be the train. So I went online, and immediately someone put online that there was an earthquake that was only 3.3. But some of you come from countries, or in fact towns or cities, that may have experienced an earthquake before. I put up some of the recent earthquakes that have happened, that have been broadcast across the news and the TV. You will know about the earthquake in New Zealand, just across the ocean there in the country nearby to us, when Christchurch was devastated by an earthquake. Some people remember it because they ran out of Marmite. How many of you like to eat Marmite? Some of you like to eat Marmite. The Marmite factory was closed because of this earthquake. And so if you could not find any Marmite in Safeway or Coles, it was because of this earthquake. But on a more serious note, there were also earthquakes in Haiti and Japan and in other places. In fact, just in the last few days, I know that some people sitting in the audience come from a province in China called Yunnan, and there has been an earthquake there which has devastated buildings and lives and homes. In fact, until this very day. All these earthquakes bring an interesting fact to our attention. In the first 10 years of the 21st century, there were 217 earthquakes recorded over 7. 7 on the Richter scale is considered a major earthquake. From 1980 to 2008, 593,680 people died in an earthquake. Have you ever seen on the newspaper or the internet or the TV news and stories of people who have perished or died in this earthquake and wondered to yourself, how many more earthquakes do we have to see before something changes? The third thing that was predicted, the signs, tsunamis, cyclones, and floods, and so on and so forth. In fact, in Luke chapter 21, verse 25, the Bible says the sea and the waves roar, and that would be a prediction that the end or the last empire would be coming. I have a friend who was in Townsville working as a doctor at the hospital up there when Cyclone Yasi struck. Do you guys remember Cyclone Yasi? For those of you who were in Australia in around 2011, this was perhaps one of the most severe cyclones to ever hit northern Australia. He was working in the hospital at the time, and the hospital became an emergency shelter because it was tsunami-proof. But just to be sure, they sent most of the severely sick or the acutely unwell patients from Townsville to Brisbane because they were not sure whether the cyclone would affect the power and the water supply, which would power the machines that are needed to keep the intensive care patients alive. And so he told me stories of how the cyclone survivors, some people who decided to stay at home to protect their family or their house or their livestock or their farm, in fact got caught up in the cyclone and had to be treated as patients in his hospital. And some of the injuries that he described to me are too gruesome. I think you won't want to have dinner after I tell you the stories, but just give a glimpse of what it could be like to go through one of these events. You see, Jesus predicted these things with 100% accuracy, and all these signs are starting to come through. The more you read the popular news, the more you realize that the signs predicting the last empire are coming to pass. Cyclones, tsunamis, earthquakes, famines, but more importantly, the second group of signs is one in the political world. You see, Matthew chapter 24 continues to describe in verse 6, and it says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars." As Jesus answers the question of his disciples, what will happen to predict or to give us a clue that the last empire is coming? Verse 6 tells us there will be wars and rumors of wars. For nation rises against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And in fact, again, if you keep up to date with current affairs, you will know just recently that there has been a conflict that may escalate, some people say, to war between two countries located in Europe. In fact, it got so out of hand that someone decided to shoot down accidentally or on purpose, no one knows, an airliner with innocent civilians crossing the country. In fact, my sister and I know two girls who lost their parents on that flight. And I know of my colleagues who had senior professors who were flying to Melbourne for an AIDS conference who died on that airline. And so as you go through world's history, you will start to realize and start to think about and start to wonder to yourself, what do all these things mean? The answer is clear tonight. As you go through history or as you live in today's world, you realize that these things are happening more and more each day. As I go onto my Facebook feed to check sometimes the latest things on my Facebook account, I notice more and more often my friends starting to post some interesting information about this conflict on the screen. You see, I have some Jewish friends who feel very strongly about a particular conflict that's happening in the world today, and so they will post one thing, and then some of my other friends will respond in a different way, and then soon the comments on my Facebook page grow like this. And even though they are so separated from this conflict far away in the Middle East, yet they still feel it because they feel part of this conflict. And so for years and years, you will know, if you keep up to date again with the news, you will know that this conflict is not something that's happened in the last month or the last week or the last year, but it's happened over and over and over again for many, many years. But you see, the Bible had already predicted so many thousands of years ago that as the time comes to the last empire ever to exist, these signs would start to increase. Political signs and also those in the natural world. Just recently, again, the US has authorized airplane strikes against different groups in Iraq. We see that in the 20th century alone, 180 million people have died in some sort of war or conflict. And in the 20th century again alone, there have been 38 major wars and conflicts with thousands of others, minor conflicts going on. You see, you may say to yourself, well, what does this actually mean? I mean, everyone's fighting today. But Jesus made the prediction when he lived on earth in around AD 27, 28, 29. 2,000 years later, you see an exponential increase in the time that we live in of all these signs and wonders that are happening. Recently, I mentioned last night that I went to Europe. When I was in Munich, my family visited a concentration camp. Now, if you ever get the opportunity, I would advise you to go and have a look at a concentration camp, not because it's a pleasant place to go to, but because it is an extremely sobering experience. We took a bus from the train station from Munich early one morning. I remember we sat on the bus. It took us about an hour or 30 minutes to get from our place where we were staying to this concentration camp. The name of this concentration camp was Dachau, D-A-C-H-A-U. I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong, but you get the idea. This concentration camp served as the model for all concentration camps that the Nazis used during World War II. In other words, they copied the way they ran a concentration camp, the way they planned it, the way they structured it, according to this place. Every single prisoner who marched into this place would come through the door here and go into the back, or rather to the campsite. This was the front gate. The guards used to live in this was the guardhouse. They used to live upstairs on the second floor. And they would walk through these gates seemingly to the end. And so we walked around. There's no longer any barracks where the prisoners stayed, but they put different displays there. They showed us what it looked like to have the barbed wire around the concentration camp, what the guard tower would look like, how they would electrify the fence. And then when they brought us around, they have a museum where, looking at some of the pictures of what it was like to live there, to some of the old videos of what it was like to be involved in a war. Many of the people who were brought to this camp were prisoners of war, obviously, who had done nothing wrong. In some cases, the Jews and other religious figures were brought as a result of this conflict. The picture that stood out in my mind was as we walked to the crematorium. There's a crematorium that was built slightly outside the camp on the other side of the wall where they used to bury and to cremate the dead. This on the screen here, I know you can't see the picture well, but I put it in black and white because it just reflected my mood as I walked into that place. This is a gas chamber. Now, if you've studied history before, you will know that the Nazis used gas chambers to have mass killings of their prisoners. And so what they used to do was they bring the prisoners together and they would tell the prisoners above the door, outside this door here on the top, there is a word that says the shower room in German. And so they told the prisoners, we are going to give you a shower. And in fact, when you go in here, you see these little black things on the ceiling. They look like your shower head when you go into the toilet to have a bath or to have a shower. But in fact, what they would do is they would put gas that would go inside and would fill this room and poison the prisoners to death. And so these are the realities of war that you see. And I wonder what it would be like. They said they were cremating so many bodies every day that they soon ran out of coal to do so, that they had to just pile the bodies in a corner in this. As you see these signs starting to go and take place day after day, week after week, as you read the newspaper, you must be thinking to yourself, is there something else? And the answer I want to tell you tonight is that there is a reason why these things are happening. We hear of terrorist attacks every day. In fact, we even also talk about nuclear conflicts and other things. But I want to bring to your attention more signs that suggest we are coming towards the last empire. The third sign that I want to talk about is things that are happening in the social world. Matthew 24 continues as Jesus answers his disciples. He says, because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But know this, in the last days, in other words, the days before the last empire will happen, perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, of money, boasters, proud, blasphemous, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal. It continues, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. The Bible is basically describing the condition of man, of the human race, before the last empire happened. I want to give you a glimpse of what this actually means by using some examples from my workplace. You see, I'm a pediatric doctor, so I look after patients that range from 0, so when you're born, to 18. When you're 18, you're considered an adult. You go off to adult land, and the adult doctors look after you. You know, back in my primary school days and in my high school days, we used to have some school rules. How many of you remember some school rules from your primary school days? Some people don't. They never listen to the school rules, must be. I remember the school rules when I was in primary school very carefully. You know why? We used to have exercise books in my primary school. Exercise books are, those books where you have the lined paper and you're supposed to write your English or Chinese or any of the words that you learn. It's like a blank book. We used to call them exercise books. And so I took a picture for you to see. This was my school rules in 1995. All right? Pupils must come to school in a clean uniform. And we are not allowed to wear jewelry. We must come to school on time. It's not permitted to loiter and all these other bits and pieces. Do you think that these are, look at my school rules here, you must queue up to buy food, and then you must put the plates, bowls, and cups back in the little container that they have at the school canteen. Do you think these rules are rules that we use today? Some people say yes, some people say no. If you want to read the Chinese rules, you can read them down here. We're not allowed to gamble or fight and not waste water or electricity. It sounds like at home, right? Turn off the light and make sure you have a short shower. These were the school rules that used to be in the classroom in my primary and high school days. When I see patients now who come to the emergency department who are 9 or 10, sometimes 6 or 7, maybe 11 or 12, the issues that they face at school are not wasting electricity or water. Neither are they talking about keeping their hair short and neat. But in fact, if you look at the problems that face especially high schoolers nowadays, they are totally different. I was working in a particular country town in Victoria as part of my rotation, and I met a mom who I thought was the grandmother of the child, but in fact was only 15 years old. She didn't know who the father of her child was, and this was her second pregnancy, her second child. And so we are faced with a situation where the teenagers, the young people of today, and if you need any evidence of this, feel free to join me for work one day, where things such as drug use, alcohol, pregnancy, suicide, rape, robbery, and assault are common, if not everyday occurrence. And so my question to you, what is the difference, especially for those who are slightly older in the audience, who will remember what it was like in primary school back in their day? What is the difference that has changed in society from that time to now, that these are the things that 12, 13, 14-year-old children are dealing with today? In Australia, the recorded assaults increased from 623 per 100,000 in 96 to 840 per 100,000 in 2007. In fact, this is an area that I have to work in because this directly applies to my line of work. In Australia, they say that 1 in 6 boys or 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused before the age of 18. In fact, you know that there's a royal commission happening at the moment in Australia looking at child abuse. I just want to tell you one really sad story. Obviously, this is a poster that you put up not as a real thing, but as a promotional tool. Sometimes when we have children come to our emergency department, we have to screen whether or not they have been abused by their caregivers. Their parents, their guardians, their grandparents, their parents' partner or their mom's partner or their father's partner in some cases, when we cannot come to a conclusion as to how a particular baby or a child has come to their injury. And so I remember there was this one case, the first ever case I saw. There was a 4-month-old baby that had been found by DHS. DHS is the Health Services Department of the government who look after some people. He was in a home where, from what I understand, mom was an alcoholic and dad was a drug user. And so in their government house, they had gone for a routine visit and they heard the baby crying from the side of the room. And because there was no answer, 3 days later, they went back and they still heard the baby crying. And so the police actually had to come to get in and enter the room to try and find out what was happening. And so there they found the baby abandoned in a pram with 3 empty milk bottles and the parents nowhere to be found. So they brought the baby to the hospital, and it was our job to figure out what was wrong with the baby. We soon realized that the baby had sustained multiple fractures to the baby's legs, and that the baby, we thought, had been shaken such that it had suffered severe brain bleeding that would be irreversible. You see, it's in these situations when I go to work and I face these things, when I see them, I ask myself the question, why are these things happening? Why is there an increase in these things? Is there an overall reason why this is the case? And the only conclusion that I can come to is that as more and more of these signs line up, they suggest that the end is coming, that the last empire is soon to come. The fourth group of signs is those in the financial world. For those of you who specialize in accounting or finance or economics, you will be more familiar with this than I am. I'm not very good with money. I only deal with sick people, unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it. But there are also signs that are predicted in the Bible about the financial world. Revelation 18 says, "The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. In 1 hour, such great riches came to nothing." And so the Bible predicts just before the last empire, there will be signs in the financial world that suggest that 1 minute, everyone was buying and selling some particular thing, but in the next minute or in the next hour, great riches came to nothing. All of us saw what happened with the global financial crisis in 2008. They call it the GFC or whatever name you want to give to it. And people can give multiple reasons why it happened, but the underlying reason is that it basically fulfilled a sign of the last empire that was coming. The Bible continues to say, "Now you rich who weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you, your riches are corrupted, your gold and silver are corroded. You have heaped up treasure in the last days. The wages of the laborers which you keep back by fraud cry out. You have lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury. You also be patient, for the coming of the Lord is at hand." The Bible predicts that just before the last empire happens, the rich people will get richer and keep the money for themselves and keep it from the other people who need or who deserve or who have earned that money. The best example of this that I have seen in my eyes is what I've shown you on the screen here. Now, I don't think you can see it really clearly. I apologize. The picture was a little hard to take. I study in a place called Baltimore in the United States. For those of you who have been to this city before, it was one of the cities that was affected the most by the global financial crisis. This city is predominantly an industrial city. So it has its main economy is ports, and it has a big harbor, which a lot of people work in. And it was directly affected because a lot of trade was stopped as a result of the GFC. And so here you see in this picture, I was on the top floor of my apartment building. One winter's morning, it was cold, and so it was about 7:30 in the morning, and I decided to take a picture. On the left here, you see where the crane is, and the buildings are all built up. I'm just looking out straight across my apartment block. Here lies the famous Johns Hopkins Medical Complex. So it has a big hospital, lots of research buildings, a very famous medical school, and a lot of things that are built up there, rich and organized and also well developed. To the right here, where you see these buildings in the gray or the pink or the white, you will find one of the largest ghetto towns in modern day America. When you drive through these places, you basically see this. All you see are buildings, houses that have been abandoned, that they've put boards up, that people simply abandon because it costs them more to sell the house than it does to give them, the return is less than what they would have if they sold the house. So they basically abandon the house, run off, and live somewhere else because it's too hard. And so you go street after street of these boarded up houses, simply just on the other side, 1 block away. It's literally to walk from here to here takes you 2.5 minutes. This is a stark example of what the Bible is saying, that some people, just before Jesus comes, just before the last empire, will be so rich, while others will simply abandon their houses because it costs too much to sell the house, that it was not worthwhile. So my question to you tonight, as you start to see these signs in the natural world, signs in the financial world, signs in the social world, signs in the world around you, could it be that another of the prophecies that the Bible suggests is actually coming true? Last night we looked at the last empire from Babylon all the way down to the last kingdom that will happen on this earth. Tonight we see more detail as it gives us greater clues as to when this is to take place. The last group of signs I want to cover tonight is that of the religious world. You see that a lot of people, as we go through history, have claimed to be a Christ or a Messiah or a Savior or some religious figure of some sort. In fact, Matthew 24, going back to Jesus' answer to his disciples, it says that false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. It continues to say, I see 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out. They are spirits of demons performing signs and miracles. And so Jesus says, before the last kingdom comes, before the last empire happens, there will be people who try to imitate, or people who will try to say that they are performing signs, miracles, and they are the ones who are going to be the last king. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? Then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. The Bible says just before the last empire happens, there will be people who come who try to imitate or who try to say that they are part of the last empire, but actually they are not. And when the real thing comes, Jesus will say, I knew you not. So if you walk on the streets of Melbourne, or if you walk on the streets of wherever or whichever city that you live in, you will start to realize that as more and more of these signs start to happen, they are a signal that the last empire is coming. We talked about the miracles. In fact, the Bible continues to say the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. And so here we see we have natural wonders or signs, we have political signs, we have financial signs, we have religious signs, we have signs in the world around us. But the ultimate sign that comes in Matthew 24, which the Bible talks about, is the gospel of the kingdom will go as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. If you want to substitute a word there, we can take the end out and we can say, then the last empire will come. And so many of you saw the brochure or the flyer and came to the seminar series because you wanted to find out a little bit more about this last empire. My answer for you tonight is, when this happens, apart from all the other signs, then the last empire will come. The spread of Christianity, the Time magazine wrote in an article, adherents to the faith, Christianity, have more than tripled across Asia since 1970, jumping from just over 100 million to over 350 million today. In fact, back just a couple of years ago, 1.5 years ago, I read an article about a particular person who went to Papua New Guinea. This news reporter was writing a news report of what had happened in that city, in Port Moresby that day, and he was describing a mass baptism. Now, baptism is something that certain Christian groups practice when they accept people into their particular faith or community. Except this time, it wasn't just one person getting baptized, it was 3,000 people. In fact, they didn't have enough space that day to fit enough people into the pool or the harbor or the bay that they were baptizing, that they had actually 6,000 people who were ready, but they needed to delay the second group of 3,000 a few weeks later to be able to get enough people. The last sign before the last empire happens is that the gospel will go into all the world, and in fact, when that happens, you will start to realize that truly the last empire is coming. So if someone asks you, how do I know who will be the next world power? How do I know when it's coming? The only sign, or the most important sign to find out, the most important sign to realize, is the sign that the gospel will be preached to all the world. The natural world, the political world, the social world, the financial world, the religious world, global warnings in all these areas can only mean one thing. As they increase, I challenge you, if you leave this place, go home, take your newspaper, keep reading your newspaper for the next month, for the next 2 months, 6 months, 2 years, and you will start to realize that these signs show no sign, pardon the pun, of decreasing, but in fact, they are all increasing in intensity, in frequency, in ready, or in availability, or in terms of being recognized by people. And so Matthew 24 verse 33, Jesus' final answer to his disciples says, when you see all these things, know that it, in other words, the last empire coming, as we learned last night, is near and is at the doors. My question to you tonight is, are you listening to the sign? How many of you have ever missed a plane before? Are proud to say that you missed it. I have only ever missed one plane before. And that was entirely my fault. I can't blame Qantas for delaying for doing something. It was entirely my fault. You see, what had happened was, no, I wasn't doing this. But what happened was I was engaging in a conversation on Skype with a friend who lives in the United States, and we hadn't called up for a while, so I called him on Skype to talk to him. And as we were talking, I looked at my watch, and I realized that I still had time. Because I was going to take the Sky Bus from my house to Melbourne Central, and then Southern Cross, and take the train from the bus from Southern Cross to the airport. And so I calculated backwards. I was taking a flight from Melbourne to Sydney, and I said, okay, I need this much time, and the bus has this much time, and I give myself a 30-minute extra buffer so I wouldn't miss my plane. And so I said, if there's traffic, it's okay. The bus, I give myself extra 30 minutes. The bus will, let's say it takes 30 minutes longer. I will still make it on time. I have no check-in luggage. I'm ready to go to Sydney. And so I said, it's okay. I have time to call my friend. So we started to talk and talk. And you know, sometimes I use a Microsoft Outlook. So I have an Outlook calendar. And on Outlook calendar, when you put an event into the calendar, sometimes it will come up with a reminder, you know, like a warning. It just pops up on your screen and it says, 15 minutes to go, or 30 minutes to go. And so it popped up on the screen. I said, it's okay, don't worry, I have plenty of time. And then it popped up again 15 minutes later. I said, it's okay, I have plenty of time. And then I maximized my Skype to be full screen. And you know what happens when you do full screen? All the reminders get hidden behind, right? And so I was talking. And we were talking, and I looked at my watch. Oh yeah, still enough time, but actually my watch battery died. So I was talking, and then Skype, and then I say, oh, what happened to those reminders, right? I was supposed to catch the train and the Sky Bus and blah, 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 blah. And so I minimized the Skype video call screen, and then I saw the reminders, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reminders piled up behind. You see, if I had looked at those warning signs, I would have made my plane. So I grabbed my bags, rushed onto the train station, got onto the train, but you know what it's like, Melbourne traffic. It just has to be that day that there's a traffic jam and an accident, so the Sky Bus was 30 minutes delayed on the freeway. And so I ran into the Qantas counter, and then I saw my plane. Final call. And then as soon as I got to the security, it changed, departed, so too late. And so my question for you tonight is, missing a plane is not as bad as missing the last empire. If you have all these warning signs like reminders on the Microsoft Outlook calendar or reminders on your iPhone or whatever timer countdown you set for your exam, you know, sometimes you use a watch in your exam so you know you have 30 minutes left, so you have 15 minutes to do this question and 20 minutes to do that question or 50 minutes to do the other part of the exam. My question for you tonight is, are you going to miss the last empire? You see, in Sydney, they are nice. They put this big sign there that says traffic signal camera or warning, there's a camera here. In Victoria, they're a little bit more mean because they just tell you, they put the sign behind the bush so that it says cameras will operate in this area, but then the bush grows and covers the sign, and before long, you see the flash in the background, right, when you're speeding down the freeway because you're late to the Last Empire series. Jesus is not like that. He doesn't put the sign behind the bush so you cannot see, but there is a clear sign that says, my coming, rather the last empire is near. There are natural signs, there are religious signs, there are political signs, there are financial signs. I've given you as many signs as you can have, as many signs as you need to see and need to be warned that something is going to happen. You see, the Bible says the Lord is not slack concerning his promise, not willing that any should perish, but all should come to repentance. In other words, he wants everyone to know that the last empire is coming, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, signifying that some of us will be so shocked when it comes because we've missed the signs. But the Bible encourages us in Luke chapter 21, verse 28. When these things begin to happen, in other words, in 2014, look up and lift up your heads, don't be downcast, because your redemption draws nigh. The reason why Jesus is giving us these clues is because the last empire, as we learned last night, is a place where there's no more death, no more wars, no more concentration camps, no more gas chambers, no more missing planes, no more earthquakes, no more famines, no more any of these things, but a place where there is no more pain. And so as we learn more and more about the last empire, it's soon coming, the signs that predict it's coming, I have one question for you. What is it like to be in a kingdom of the last empire? What is there going to be? Is there going to be money? Is there going to be riches? Is there going to be, no, there's no more pain, no more crying? Is there going to be gold? What is the ruling person going to be like? What is the emperor going to be like? I have an answer for you. In just a few minutes, someone is going to tell you who his final emperor will be. I'm going to pass the time back to Jeremy now. We will have a short break before we continue on our journey of the last